For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. In a bold and unexpected move, William Gumede has published his first ever children's book. William, you are known for writing political books such as Thabo Mbeki and The Battle for the Soul of the ANC. What inspired you to change direction and write a children's book?
After Thabo Mbeki, the response from my Thabo Mbeki was, sometimes so hostile, and during that period, I had good reviews, but also some very hostile reviews and so on, and there was such a big braha around it that I thought in that period, I better do something different, something outside politics. And, I love telling stories. And if it wasn't for South Africa's politics, I think I would have been most probably a fiction writer rather than a non-fiction writer. And over the years since I have kids, I've been telling them stories. And this is one of these stories that I told them. And I thought, well, why not try and send it off to a publisher? It's a potential book. And that's how it came about. And the other part of it is also that, the story really reflects for me two of my big loves. The one is when I was little, I used to make kites in the townships, and a lot of people knew me as somebody who made kites. And I actually often sold the kites. And for me, was as a child, when I flew the kites, I used to think and wonder where the kite would go off if the string breaks, and I could imagine, going over mountains, going to other countries and so on. So it was, for me, quite a escape, out of my immediate circumstances. And for me, my adult love of traveling, I love traveling, and particularly for me, the discovery of Africa has been, for me as an adult, a very, very exciting thing.
Was it a challenge for you to change discourse from intellectual engagements to talking to children?
It was not as difficult as I thought it would be. Having had my own children, it is, it's easier because, one has to engage with your children every day. And I think as human beings, we have sort of different parts of us. The one part is you sort of serious political, but the other part is, you can't be serious political if you're with your children or, with your wife or partners and so on. And I think what helped is that I, on a regular basis, do tell my children stories, and and I invent stories for them, and I love that, and they love that, or sometimes, all the time. And with the kite flight, I did exactly the same. And what I worried about was whether I would be able to get the right pitch for children, because I'm so used to thinking in terms of an adult readership and so on. But what helped was that my kids, they were very critical. When they didn't like a story, they will fall asleep, or they will, they would just walk away or start to do something else, fiddling with something else and so on. So it's quite clear when they bored with it, so that helps.
A Kite's flight describes historic and iconic places across the African continent. Why do you think it is important for children to develop an understanding of such things?
I think, for me, what I wanted to do is I wanted to encourage, not only for my children, but I think, for all South African children, all African children, and even, children outside the continent, a feeling for Africa, a kind, an interest for Africa, the continent, and, for its richness, for the excitement, the idea of Africa. And for me as an adult, the last couple of years for me has been a discovery of this continent and so on. And I want to get the children also, to have the same feeling of excitement, something new, something to, discover for themselves and so on.
How did you go about choosing specific areas or geographies to highlight in your book?
What I wanted to do, I wanted to highlight some of the key things, key geographical places. And if you think about when I grew up as a child in township, and I was thinking about these sort of things like Kilimanjaro, the mountain, things like the Victoria Falls, and so on. For me, that was always, I've always dreamt about going there myself. And for me, the excitement of actually going to places you always dreamt about. And for me, those iconic African places and spaces, I wanted to, to generate interest for that among children.
A Kite's Flight was the winner of an award for the best children's book in Africa. Can you tell us more about this award?
Kite Flight won the American award. Awards. It's called Children's Writers and Illustrators Society. You know, they annually have an award, and they have, you know, the American one, and then they have the international division. And the Kite Flight was then voted by children writers and illustrators as the best book in Africa. It, of course, I mean, it's a very, for us, it was and for the illustrator with me, Maya Saraja, it's been a great honor, because you know, these kinds of award does carry the book and does bring the book to a new audience outside South Africa, and you know, a US audience. And then for many, you know, if you're a writer, you know, the US audience is always, you know, a target. If you can get into that audience, and with these kind of awards, it does help.
What can South African readers expect from you in the future?
I'm working on a book, or I'm just about to hand in a book which I've been working for the last 8 years on. It is also about Africa, and this is an adult book about Africa. I've been looking at, you know, Africa since the Second World War, and looking at why have liberation movements and independent movements, it's now African liberation movement and independent movements, when they get to power, many of them have failed. You know, just a few of them have actually really been successful. So I've looked at three things. Firstly, why have so many of the African governments failed on building viable democracies? Why have they struggled to build, you know, unified nations? Because most African countries comes with very diverse societies. And thirdly, why have they failed on the economic front? Most of them have failed on the economic front. And for me, it's been also, again, a discovery for me, you know, of Africa. And for me, it's always been a question that I've asked myself, you know, as a teenager and growing up, and also somebody, you know, as an adult who's politically conscious. You know, why have movements like, for example, in Zimbabwe, ZANU-PF, why have they failed in power? You know, many of these movements started off with, you know, very noble ideas, but once they get to government, somehow they just don't get it right. And that is a question that I've tried to answer for myself, and hopefully also, you know, for a broader readership in South Africa, but also around the world.
Well, we wish you all the best with that, and good luck.
Thank you.
Donate now and give 15 Rand a month. SMS JOIN to 41486.